Lambert. Kill him.
That can wait.
The master of the revels despises us all for vagrants and peddlers of bombast. But my father, James Burbage, had the first license to make a company of players from Her Majesty, and he drew from poets the literature of the age. We must show them that we are men of parts. Will Shakespeare has a play. I have a theater. The curtain is yours.
Is it Anonymous? Do you know that movie Anonymous?
No.
Okay, so that's a movie that's the premise of the movie is that all of Shakespeare's work was written by someone who basically used this.
Oh, him as a beard.
Yeah. So you haven't seen the movie yet?
That rings a bell, actually. But I know the plot, so perhaps, well, I'll check it out.
And,
but yes, there are lots of stories about Shakespeare. Lots of people think Francis Bacon wrote the plays and used him just as a cover.
Yeah,
there are lots of variations on that story about who he really was, because not much is known about him, to be truthful. The real Shakespeare.
What do you make of the Francis Bacon case? Do you think there's truth to that?
Sorry, say again.
What do you make of the Francis Bacon case? Do you think there's any truth to that?
No. But then my mum was an avid Shakespeare's, the man himself. She was very keenly that side and considered the Bacon story, and there's lots of others, the Earl of Oxford and Edward de Vere. There are lots of candidates for the conspiracy theory.
Where did those stories come from, though? Why would someone just suddenly invent a story that Francis Bacon or the Earl of Oxford was writing under the name Shakespeare? Like, why would someone, unless it was them creating it for themselves, I guess.
There's a bit of that. There was, there was one Victorian guy who was a great Francis Bacon fan and wanted him to get the credit, I guess, to make him more famous, because he wrote philosophy and he did lots of stuff. But I don't really know why it started or how or where it started. But I think something to do with the fact that no one really knows much about Shakespeare. And when they do track down bits about him, he doesn't sound like a genius. He sounds like he arrives in London, he's an actor. When he makes a bit of money, he retires and seems to be some sort of middle-aged merchant living out in Stratford. And he doesn't sound like what we want. He doesn't sound like Oscar Wilde or Orson Welles, or doesn't sound like a genius. He sounds like someone just making money at it and so on. But he obviously did make quite a lot of money writing those plays, because the Queen liked it and all that. But we're still baffled by how wonderful his language was and how he seemed to have references about other countries, a huge vocabulary. And I think those are some of the reasons that people like Francis Bacon will put forward. It's a snobbery thing, This ordinary working class guy couldn't have written these. It must have been somebody posh and clever and well educated and travelled and that stuff. But who really knows? I don't know. We will never know.
We will never know, not definitively anyway. But it's interesting because he would not be the first artist who would strike me as a simpleton. Yet when he did his art, something magical happened. So we literally don't know. I mean, I think it's also odd that he literally put everything into the plays. And there's no biography, there's no written stories, there's no anecdotes about him. And, history was getting written down at that point. You'd think somebody would have written down some kind of celebrity gossip or, something like that. Well, here's what's interesting to the case, right, is that you would think that the London stage community at that time was a pretty tight-knit group who was sort of in the know, the way we all knew Milli Vanilli was lip syncing, right? The real world they didn't know, but we all knew, And so you would think that if he really wasn't who he said he was, then that would have just taken off like in a huge way. Because people love to, people hate to be lied to, and that's why they love to root out a fake.
Yeah.
No. So
I mean, there are some things. The language is definitely unique. You know, the actual choice of words and so on. But his plots, for instance, he stole plots from all over the place. Several of the comedies are traditional commedia dell'arte. Italian traveling players used to do these improvised shows. Now, he definitely saw them. They were in London. He definitely stole the plots because they involve mistaken identity, love, jealousy, you know, all the basic plot things.
Right.
And many of them, because we've researched them now, and many of those old stories he's definitely used. And for some of the histories, he dug up some old histories of England, and you know, the kings, for instance, the kings all have myths and legends around them. Did Richard III actually kill the two children that were, you know, in line for the throne? Or, and a lot of that is propaganda. A lot of that is, I mean, if you imagine the Queen now, for instance, is what, 96 or something, and her son is 70, still waiting to be king. In the Middle Ages, he would have killed her. It's very simple. He would have killed her and got the job as king. And so Shakespeare's histories involve royal families which were like soap operas. I mean, they literally, they would have, you know, like, it's like Dallas or one of those old TV things with power politics going on all the time.
Dallas.
And, yeah. Well, that's going back a long way. But
it's a great reference. That's a great reference, though, for those who get it.
I'm not sure what the modern equivalent is. There is one, I'm sure, but power politics anyway, and completely ruthless people.
Your road to redemption is paved with tombstones. No quarter, kill all masters. Go to noquarterkillallmasters.com. Rated R.